My mother-in-law, she's not like most mother-in-laws you complain about. Oh no, she's way worse. Get this. She decides to invite my soon-to-be husband's ex to my wedding, and guys, imagine my surprise when I see her there. But she didn't just come to check stuff out and blend in with the crowd. Oh no, she came wearing a full white wedding gown. What would you do if the biggest day of your life turned out to be the complete opposite of what you wanted it to be? Like, what was supposed to be a daydream became the worst nightmare of your life. I don't know what any of you would do in this situation, but I'm honestly losing my mind. And it might all be because of my stupid mother-in-law. So let me start this off properly so that you have an idea of why I'm fuming right now. I'm Robin. And the nightmare I was talking about that happens to be my wedding, which was 2 days back, and I still haven't recovered from all that happened. Because whatever happened and what was supposed to be my dream wedding is too much to move on from. So basically, all was going well at my wedding. Like everything was just exactly as beautifully as I planned, and everything was in a place until my husband's ex showed up at the wedding. Yep, that's right, my husband's crazy ex, if I might add, showed up to our wedding, and this is not even the worst part of it. The crazy part is that she showed up dressed in a white gown. Yeah, a white, floor-length gown, which actually looked better than my own dress. So you can imagine how all of this was just a disaster waiting to happen. I have a very strong suspicion that my mother-in-law is after it all. Now, before I get into what actually happened at my wedding, let me tell you guys the relationship dynamics between mother-in-law Meredith and I, so that you get a clear understanding of, what's going on exactly. I suspect her so strongly about this, so my husband Tim introduces me to his mother in the initial months of our dating, just because he was sure of me right from the start. You know, even though we come from a pretty different financial and cultural background, that was never a problem between Tim and me. We seemed to connect on an emotional level with an amazing understanding, which was enough for us to take this relationship forward. But clearly it was not enough for Meredith, because from the moment she met me, the look on her face gave me a clear sense of disapproval. Meredith had always wanted a rich, white girl as her daughter-in-law who could fit into her family well. Well, I was the complete opposite of that. I came from a somewhat humble background, and though I had a great job to support myself and even my family, it was not enough for Meredith, who was used to spending lavishly using her husband's money. But the worst part of her was that I was not a white girl. Yep, my mother-in-law is not only a classist, but also a racist, whose worst nightmare is for her son to fall in love with somebody with a dark skin tone. Like, God forbid he falls for someone without a porcelain-colored skin. So, you can imagine how I've been treated all this while at the hands of my mother-in-law. The very first time we met, she created a whole scene later on in front of Tim, talking about how I would never be able to fit into the family and nobody would ever accept me. Well, you know, my own father-in-law, Walter, he proved her to be completely wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. Because from the moment we've met, Walter was like the sensible choice. His son, made a good decision and he agreed. We often bonded over our views of political scenarios, so it's clear that it was just Meredith who refused to accept me at this point of the family, and the rest of them, no one has a problem with me, and that's the truth. It makes sense since Walter is not a racist like her, who falls to see beyond the skin color of anyone. But me being with Tim has been bothering Meredith all this time, and she's tried her best to convince Tim not to marry me. She's left no stone unturned in her attempts, be it emotional manipulation or the accusations of me being a characterless woman engaging in secret affairs. Guys, she's tried everything. She even went ahead to call me a gold digger since Tim earns far more money than me. But Tim trusts me and knows very well that I would never be interested in his money since, for the first few dates, I didn't even know he was rich. And I was already intrigued by his charming personality. But his stupid mother refused to believe any of this even after Tim's continuous efforts to convince her. But with time, her attempts at sabotaging our relationship stopped unexpectedly and she stopped bothering me so much. Me and Tim thought that we were finally wearing her down, and slowly but gradually she was starting to accept me as part of the family. But whatever happened at my wedding clearly indicates otherwise. I know a lot of you would think that I don't have any particular proof to believe that my mother-in-law was after the whole fiasco. But after all she's done to me, can you even blame me for thinking that she's the culprit here? It might be getting a bit confusing right now, so let me clarify what exactly happened at the wedding. As I mentioned before, the wedding was going perfectly, like Tim had hired the best wedding planner who takes care of every single detail and made sure that I had the wedding of my dreams. But I guess Leah, Tim's ex-girlfriend, had other plans for us. So there I was, standing in front of Tim, and we were just about to take our vows when Leah came shouting into the venue wearing a white gown, asking us to stop the wedding. Both me and Tim were too shocked to react, while Leah just took a position in front of her and started declaring her still very persistent love for Tim. She went on to say how I had stolen Tim from her, and though Tim still loved her, I was the one who manipulated him with my witchy schemes just to get married. Well, while everybody was busy being shocked by Leah's declarations, I looked at Meredith, and that's when I noticed a slight smile on her face. This is one of the very reasons that I believe that Meredith is, after all, behind this. But at this point, I had an even bigger issue at my hand, which was Leah and all the lies she was spewing to the guest. They were starting to believe it, and considering her crying like a maniac, Leah is so good of an actor. I'll give her that. Basically, what happened is, Leah and Tim's past was that Leah went ahead to cheat on Tim, and Tim straight away dumped her. But Leah was not somebody to let go of Tim that easily, and she turned into this whole obsessive stalking girlfriend phase for months trying to get Tim back. This was the point when Tim met me and we fell in love. Leah tried to bother even me at this start, but when she stopped soon after when Tim threatened to report her if she did not stop. So that's when Leah finally gave up on Tim. Or so we thought, because clearly Leah making a scene at my wedding did not really indicate the same. Guys, so coming back to what happened at the wedding next. So, after a few very long minutes of the drama, Tim got someone to throw Leah out of the wedding venue and the peace was restored. But obviously it was not as it should have been. Everybody was gossiping and we even considered if we should go ahead with the wedding or not. But in my head, I knew that if I postponed this wedding, then not only Leah but also Meredith, who might be the mastermind behind this evil scheme, might succeed in ruining our wedding day. So we took a short break and discussed things. Even then, Meredith tried her best to get us to postpone the wedding, saying that all of this happening last minute might have been a sign from the universe that we should not carry on with the wedding. And the funny part was that she almost manipulated Tim to postpone it, by saying that this was not the dream wedding that I had wanted. I bet Meredith had been putting all her hopes on us, postponing the wedding, but I knew that if I did not get married to Tim that day, then no one knows what might happen in the future. So I could not lose my chance. I stood my ground and told Tim that I want to continue the ceremony. Well, Tim, being the supportive partner that he is, kept my wishes above anything else. Though, the whole environment was sour and it was nothing as we had planned it. We got married and this time it was me who gave the smile to Meredith, who looked very mad. But none of it meant that my mind was at peace. I never thought that Meredith would go to such an extent just to sabotage our wedding. But considering how she is, this is not exactly beneath her. Well, guys, here's the problem. I don't exactly have any proof to believe it. She's the one after all this, though my guts are strongly telling me so. But when I shared the whole suspicion with Tim, he felt that his mother would not do something so evil just to ruin the wedding. He says that he's willing to believe me, but she is his mom, and he can't just actually fathom her being this evil. Well, I don't actually blame him. She is his mother indeed, and except for not being all right with his choice of woman, she's been a pretty good mom, from what Tim tells me. So, I don't know. It's just hard for him to even think that his mother is behind all of this. What do you guys think? But then there's this relentless restlessness in my mind that Meredith is behind all of this and she could go to such an extent just to ruin our wedding. I know it. What would she do to break me and Tim up now that we're married and would be living in the same house? So this is simply why I'm not willing to let this go. And I desperately want to know if Meredith is the one after this or if Leah was working on her own accord. I'm honestly pretty confused right now as I don't know what to do in this situation. Like, am I looking too much into the whole thing? and Meredith might not actually be after all this, I'm thinking that I can go straight away and confront Meredith and try to get the truth from her. Or maybe I should not alarm her and dig deep for proof myself silently. I don't actually know what to do, and this is what brings me here asking for a bit of advice. You know, this whole incident has disrupted the peace of my mind, and I can't rest until I know the whole truth, and I'll do something about it. So guys, help me out. What should I do? Update number 1. Hey guys, it's me again after just 3 days. If you're thinking that things might be better than, how they were 3 days back when I wrote the initial post, then don't get your hopes high because they are not. To put it all into one sentence, I was right. But did that make a difference? No. Why? Because my mother-in-law is a conniving little jerk who just got out of it with her crappy excuse. But before I get into the whole thing, I would like to reply to some comments. Firstly, thanks to a lot of the people who supported me and did not question my sanity for doubting my mother-in-law without any proof. You guys have been a great help, but there were also people who did question my sanity and were actually accusing me of showing things the way that they weren't. Well, to those people, it'll be quite clear that I was right, and I was not actually blowing things out of proportion at all. Now, a lot of you wanted me to just find evidence against Meredith so I can actually prove to my husband and his family that she was behind this. So I did exactly that, and I did find some evidence, but none of it matters anymore, because Meredith just spun a whole new type of story. So, initially, I'd been planning to confront Meredith, but that did not seem like a good idea anymore, since she could just lie straight to my face. So, guys, I went and decided I'm going to collect a bit of evidence to back up my hunch. It was really easy to try to collect proof against her, since we were living in the same house. Now, for the people who are wondering why I'm living with my in-laws, see, Tim has been living with his parents for a few months now since he's having a new house built specifically for us, and it's just that the house is taking some time to be finished off. And since Tim was already living here in his parents' gigantic mansion, as they refused to let him rent a small apartment or live in a hotel, I also moved in here with him. Our new house still has a few months to go before it's ready for us to move into, so yeah, though it's been hellish living in the same house as Meredith, it's also been pretty easy to get evidence against her. So, long story short, after various attempts, I was able to find Meredith's phone, unattended, which clearly showed text to Leah inviting her straight to the wedding. Yep, that's right, straight to the wedding. However, there was no mention of the rest of the plan, with Leah showing up in a white dress and creating an absolute scene. But I was sure that this whole crazy plan came from Meredith, since Leah had already left us alone some time back, and by the text messages, it seemed she was also hesitant to show up after Tim's warnings. But Meredith was the one who convinced her to show up, saying that they won't mind it. So I just simply took this proof to my husband and father-in-law. It was then that Meredith spun some other story saying that since Leah is her friend's daughter, she felt obliged to invite her to the wedding, but she was not aware that Leah would create such a scene, or else she would not have invited her. Well, she also said that it was not her fault that Tim chose me over Leah, and she would not have her friendship ruined because of us. Yeah, right. After having orchestrated this whole scene to ruin my wedding, she wanted me to believe this crap. No way in hell. But I wasn't in luck that day, because as much as I wanted them not to trust Meredith on this, Tim and my father-in-law ended up believing her story, and thought that it was her genuine mistake without thinking of what consequences it might actually lead to. Though they were somewhat mad at Meredith inviting Leah without asking anyone else, they let it go. But my father-in-law made sure to give a last warning to Meredith not to repeat anything of this sort in the future. Guys, I was honestly so disappointed by all this, because after all of this happened, Meredith simply came to me and told me that I should not try to mess with her, or else she could do something way worse than just the wedding thing, and nobody would believe anything I said, like how it happened a few minutes back. So there was my direct cue that Meredith was after it all, and I still couldn't do anything about it. I don't even blame Tim and my father-in-law, since they're just victims here being manipulated by my mother-in-law's crazy tactics. But I'm just more enraged now that Meredith would just get away with doing this to me, and I simply can't do anything about it. But I'm still not letting it go. I gotta do something about Meredith and her crazy plans, but I don't know exactly what. There's also another thing that's bothering me lately. Basically, when all of this confrontation happened, my father-in-law's best friend Vernon was also present in the house. He's actually very involved in the house, and everyone treats him like a part of the family. He was also pretty mad at Meredith for inviting Leah to the wedding, but he left soon after. It's all a bit fishy to me. I just can't shake off this weird feeling that something is wrong. I don't know, I'll try to figure things out, but until then, I just don't know what to do, and how to get back at Meredith. Anyways, whatever happens, I will keep you guys updated on it. Update number 2. Hey guys, it's me again. Well, I know I'm back after just a few days, but I have some crazy news, and honestly, even I'm not able to process it now. So just hold your breath, because this news just changes the whole dynamic. I might be getting ahead of myself a bit, so let me backpedal. As I mentioned before, that I tried to expose Meredith to Tim and my father-in-law, but she succeeded in manipulating them with her stupid story, and this has only enraged me further. Initially, if I was even thinking a percent to let her go, now I was hell-bent on teaching her a lesson, especially after she had the guts to warn me not to mess with her. She thinks that just because she was able to manipulate my husband and father-in-law this time, she would continue to do so in the future as well, and that gives her a free pass to create trouble for me. But with what I've just found out, she would be regretting ever messing with me. As I mentioned before, that I was kind of skeptical about Vernon coming out to our house so frequently. Like, I get he's my father-in-law's oldest friend, and they also work together, so they're close. I mean, being close is okay, but so much involvement in someone else's family is actually fishy. And that's the only reason why I decided to look into this whole thing, and I'm grateful I did. Because now I have this crazy thing against my mother-in-law. So basically, a few days after I wrote my last update, Vernon showed up to our house again, while my father-in-law was not there. Even I was supposed to be out on a date with Tim, but something came up at the office and his father called him. So he just called me a cab back home and left. Now, the most interesting thing happened when I got home. I'd already seen Vernon's car in the driveway when I got there, and it's all just added to my already strong suspicions. I made sure to be quiet and not to announce my coming back, and that's when I heard some angry voices coming from my father-in-law and mother-in-law's room. It was like somebody was arguing, and considering there was no one else but Vernon and Meredith at home, I wanted to see what they were talking about. I didn't want to risk it this time, so I got my camera ready to record as I reached near the room and hid myself in the position where they could not hear me. And there came the biggest shock of my life. Guess what they were arguing about? Tim and I. Yes, Meredith and Vernon were so passionately shouting and cursing at each other about us. It seemed like Vernon was accusing Meredith of intentionally inviting Leah to the wedding just to get the wedding canceled. Meredith was initially denying the fact, then all of a sudden, in her rage, she accepted that she had done so just because she could not see her son marrying some filth. I was shocked, but if you think that this was the most shocking part, then there's more. At this, Vernon just lost his calm and asked Meredith why she never told him about her problem with me before creating such a big scene at their son's wedding. Yes, Vernon said our son. Our, as in Meredith and Vernon's son. Well, I was confused, as you're probably right now, but before I could think about it anymore, Vernon clarified it by saying that Tim is his son, even though he doesn't know it, so he deserves to have a say in his life. I couldn't process any of these statements. All this debate was just meaning that all these years back, Meredith cheated on Walter with Vernon, and Tim was not Walter's son but Vernon's. I can't believe how she and Vernon could have kept this secret for so long. After all this, Vernon acted like he was someone Walter could trust. How sick is that? The arguments between Vernon and my mother-in-law continued for some time, and I got it all on recording, though. There was nothing as shocking as the truth that they just revealed. All of this happened this morning, and I don't actually know what to do with this information. I know I want revenge on Meredith, but revenge in a way that threatens to question her whole existence of my husband? That's something I need to think about. I know, I've got to reveal all this to Tim soon, but I honestly don't know how I should do it. I seriously have to think about it, though I'm pretty shaken and confused about this whole thing. There's one thing I'm pretty sure of, though. In whatever way I decide to break the news to Tim and my father-in-law, I'll make sure to teach Meredith a good lesson. I'll let you guys know whatever I decide and what goes down. Update number 3. Hey guys, it's me again. I know it's been a few weeks since my last update, and a lot of you guys were curious about what I actually decided to do with my mother-in-law. I exposed her. As you remember the last time I wrote, I was pretty confused whether I should tell my husband and father-in-law about the whole ordeal. So after days of pondering, I finally came to a conclusion of how to expose mother-in-law and her years of affairs with my father-in-law's bestie. But I just could not let her have it easy. So I came up with the most cruel revenge plan I could think of, and yes, it worked. So yesterday was my mother-in-law and father-in-law's silver jubilee party. I just gave my mother-in-law the surprise, or actually the shock of her lifetime. So if you already guessed it, then yes, you're right. I'd been waiting for this party for so long just so I could expose Meredith and Vernon in front of everyone, and that's exactly what I did. Though days before the party, my mother-in-law was hell-bent on not inviting Vernon. My father-in-law was pretty confused by this, but she said that she wanted this party to be family only. My father-in-law tried to argue that Vernon was like family, and even Meredith was inviting a few of her friends. But Meredith became stubborn and said that she would only attend the party if he did not invite Vernon. So, as stupid as Meredith's demands were, my father-in-law complied with her wishes and did not invite Vernon. I bet all of this is not inviting Vernon just because of the whole argument Meredith and he had and how my mother-in-law was scared that Vernon might do something against her. But well, I invited Vernon to the party instead, even though Meredith didn't want him there. And when Vernon showed up, she was pretty shocked. If she thought that was the only shock that she would have that day, then she was wrong. Because I had the whole surprise planned for her, and it went exactly as I thought. So, as soon as he showed up, I did not waste a minute further. I called for everybody's attention and then started the announcement, which shook both Meredith and Vernon to their floor. So just as I started, I told everyone about how Vernon and Meredith had been keeping a huge secret, and I'm here to reveal it today. Well, Meredith had gotten an idea of what I was about to do because as soon as she saw me mentioning her and Vernon in the same sentence, the color seemed to have drained from her face. I wasted no further time and played the video of Vernon and Meredith fighting, mentioning how Tim is their son. Everybody was shocked by the revelation, and my father-in-law, being furious, was the truth straight away. He went to face Meredith and asked her if any of this was real. But the person most affected by all of it seemed to be Timothy. He was standing there shocked out of his wits, too stunned to even react. I apologized to him for having done it this way. Just then he cried silently and asked me if this was actually going on, if this was happening. I held him while Walter shouted at everybody to get out, until just Vernon and our family were left. So, my father-in-law was absolutely so angry that he decides to throw Meredith out the first thing after everybody left. But Tim, being the kind person that he is, decided that they should actually be sure before reacting to the whole thing. He asked Meredith about the truth, and when she decided to stay silent, he demands that they should do a DNA test. It broke my heart seeing how much he trusted his mother, and how badly she broke his heart. So lately, the situation at our house is very tense. We're waiting for the DNA test results, but it's like the fate of Meredith has already been decided before the results even come in, because neither Tim nor Walter are speaking to Meredith or Vernon. They're pretty upset. Now, all we have to do is wait for the test. Update number 4. Hey guys. Well, I'm back with one last update on the whole thing. I know a lot of you are waiting to know what exactly happened to Meredith and Vernon. Sorry for having taken a month to write this update, but things were actually crazy here, so let me jump straight into it. As all of us as expected, the reports came out negative. It was clear that Tim was not Walter's son. As much as this affected Tim, he had somewhat been preparing himself for this, but yet it broke him anyways. I honestly felt bad about the whole thing for being the reason why he had to deal with all this, but I could not have helped it. After the reports came, my father-in-law wasted no time in throwing Meredith out of the house, and soon after he filed for a divorce. She tried asking for help from the other family members, but they shunned her for what she did. So in the end, Meredith ended up in a shelter, trying to seek a job and just make ends meet. As for Vernon, my father-in-law fired him from the company, so currently he's also looking for another job. His wife also left him after the whole thing was exposed, so you can say he's as miserable as Meredith, and I'd say both of them deserve this. Fortunately, none of this affected my husband and father-in-law's relationship, as I had feared. My father-in-law told my husband that he's always been this son, and nothing would change it, not some stupid DNA test. I'm glad that this did not lead to a strain on my husband and his father's relationship, because, Tim values his father a lot. And if he would have lost that because of me, then the guilt would have eaten me alive. So I'm not sort of satisfied with how things turned out and how I was able to teach Meredith and Vernon a lesson. Finally, with all this drama over, I can actually pay attention to my wedding. With Meredith out of the picture, well, I guess that's it from my side. Thank you and goodbye.